Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's tutorial. Today we are going to learn how to create a responsive CSS grid layout from scratch. In this tutorial, we will cover the basic of CSS grid, how to set up a grid container, and how to define a grid item. We will also explore how to make our grid responsive, ensuring it looks great on any device from desktop to smartphone. By the end of this tutorial, you will have a solid understanding of CSS grid and be able to create your own responsive layout with ease. So let's get started. But before we jump into coding part, let's define some key terms related to CSS grid. Now, CSS grid layout, commonly referred as CSS grid, is a powerful layout system available in CSS. It allows you to create a complex responsive web layout with ease by using two-dimensional grid-based design approach. Unlike Flexbox, which is one-dimensional and work along a single axis, either row or column, CSS grid handles both rows and columns, making it ideal by creating intricate layout. We have a basic concept of CSS grid. We have a grid container. This is represent as the parent element that establishes the grid context by setting its display property to grid our inline. And we have items, the direct children of grid container. Each child element becomes a grid item. We can use it by defining grid container to display grid, and we choose item. Let's say item is header. In that case, we display grid and grid template areas in order to give a header area and main, aside, footer, and so forth. So let's jump into coding part to apply this concept. And here I have HTML file and CSS style. I have linked CSS style and title of the web. So let's start by setting the basic structure of HTML. We start by grid container. So in here I have heading and for main, aside, a footer. We start by semantic tag header and class grid header. And let's call it header. Now we have semantic tag main, and for the main here I want to have a class and ID as well. So for the class, call it grid main. For the ID, let's call it main1, and the text inside main1 as well. The ID is main1, and this is ID2 and main2. And for the third one, we call it ID3 main3, ID4 main4. We have a site and class, call it grid aside. And the last one is footer. Class, call it grid footer. So now we have header, main 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a site, we have a footer. Let's jump into CSS style in order to design our page. So in CSS, let us start by resetting all margin and paddings and set border box for all element. And for that, I start by margin 0 and padding 0 as well, and box sizing, give it to border box. Now let's go to the basic style. For the body, I want to set font family. Let's call it Arial and sans serif. Set font size into 1.3 rem, and add background color to be C. Go to the grid container. Now for the grid container, use CSS grid layout. We say display grid. Here for the grid template columns, here we need to assign the columns. Here as you see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Let's say repeat, and we define here 4 by 1 fraction each. Now as we assign the column, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And now we need to set the grid template rows. For the grid template rows, I want auto. This first row will have a height that automatically adjusts based on the content inside. The second row will take up to 1 fraction of the remaining space in the grid container. And the last one also will take 1 fraction for the remaining. Now let's add gap. For the gap, give 10 pixels. Give full height viewport. So let's give a different color for each section in order to see while we are designing. And for that, let's start by header. We have a class grid header. And for the header, I want to give a background color to be dark red, color to be white, padding to be 20 pixels, and text align to be center. Now let's do this for all the classes. Grid main. And for the grid main, let's give padding. This is for all main. Padding 20 pixels to display flex. If you want to know more about Flexbox, I made full tutorial on Flexbox. You can watch it. I will put the link on the description below. Justify content to be centered. Let's here choose all the IDs. We have main 1, main 2, main 3, main 4, and we have aside, we have footer and header. For all of these, I want font size to be same. Let's make it 2 rem, and font weight to be bolder, and box shadow to have 2 pixel horizontal offset, 4 pixel vertical offset, and 6 pixel blur radius, and the color to be black. These sections to have border radius to have 10 pixel, slightly rounded corners. Now for main 1 to have different background color, let's say green. Main 2 to have dot year blues. Main 3 background color to have dark orange. The last main 4 is going to have dark gray. Grid aside. For grid aside, also give background color to be dark gray. Grid aside to have slightly different than background color. The last is footer. Grid footer we have, and for grid footer I want to choose the same as header background. Let's say 4, and change the main into dark red, footer and header to be same color. Now let's come back here and give the same color for all the text. So colors, give it to white. And now we need to assign each class for its areas. We start by grid header. For the grid header here, let's say grid areas and call it header. Main 1, grid areas, main 1, and this is main 2. This is grid area main 3, and this is main 4. Simply you call it by its name, and here grid area, call it aside. Here grid area footer. Now we need to come back to grid container and here and specify where we want, each to be. So now we need to define the grid area for layout. So let's say grid template areas. For the grid template areas, we need to define here. Let's start by header. For the areas, we want our header to be on the first column, second column, third column, and fourth column. And for that, we need to choose here. This is the first column, second column, the third column, and header for the first column. So now if we save it, the header stretch from the first column to the last column. And exactly the same, we do it for the main. We want the first, this main is the first, and the second and third column is a main 2, and the last one is aside. So for that, main 1, main 2, main 2, and the first one is aside. Now we save it. Here we have aside, main 1, main 2, aside. So, and for the third one, main 3 stretch from column 1 to 2, and main 4 is column 3rd, and aside stretch from first row to second. So that main 3 and main 3 one stretch in 2 columns, main 3. Here comes main 4, and aside will stretch from top to bottom. We save it. We have aside stretch from all the top to bottom, and we have main 3, main 4, and main 3 is stretch from first column to second column. And now the last part is footer, and we want to stretch all 4 columns. Footer, 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 footer. Now we achieved our goal by aligning all columns and rows. And if you want to replace any one of these elements, let's say I want main 4 to stretch all the way to the side part. So for that, we just write here main 4, and it is automatically stretched for the second and first column. This is very easy way to align and make it responsive as well. Let's add padding here, 5 pixel here, just to move from to see all the areas. Add padding for footer, 20 pixel, text align center, and let's bring back our alt. Let's say call it aside here, text align center as well. Now we need to assign media query to make it responsive. And now as you see here, our page is not responsive. Making responsive for CSS Grid is very simple. We just simply add media query. For the media query here, we specify max width. Here we need to give the screen size 768 pixel. Call the class name. We have a grid container. And for the grid container, we need to choose how many fraction do you want to display. So let's say grid template column, and for this we want to display only one fraction, a single column as a layout. This is for columns. And for the areas, say grid template areas. For the grid template areas, you can choose how you want to display your element. Like let's say first we choose header to be first, aside to be second, and following main 1, main 2, main 3, main 4, and footer. So now we choose aside to be first right after header, and main 1, 2, 3, 4, and footer to be the last. And now let's test it. As you see here, when we come to the size of 768, so it turned into columns and aside second place. And if I want to aside to be last right before the footer, automatically assigned to be on the bottom, easily replace the location. If we want for mobile screen, I'll copy the same and change the size of the screen 345 and save it. It is fully responsive for all type of screen. Thank you very much for tuning in. That's all for today. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified. Until next, happy coding.